guy's white paper on how DevOps drives digital transformation. They're available at our stand downstairs.
Are they available digitally?
They are available digitally, but then you have to give us your email address. You good?
I think I will be, yeah, hopefully. Okay. Let me type my password in first. Do that discreetly.
Just want to give him a sound check.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? Testing, 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 testing. Hear me? Testing, testing. Okay, cool. Oh man, I need to do a simpler password.
Presentation's cancelled. He can't remember his password.
Yeah,
Yeah, hi guys. So we're on our second speaker in this section. We've got Connon MacRae, who is the International VP of Technical Operations for TicketMaster. Wow. An organization that knows more than most about failure at scale. And so Connon's going to talk a lot about how they've re-architected their practices and processes to deal with this. Interestingly, you are largely AWS based, so not Azure based. So just to say, you can. There are other clouds are available. There's really only one other cloud.
and we have our own on-premise private cloud as well. So we'll talk a little bit about
Is it on OpenStack?
Not yet.
All right. So with no further ado, I'll hand you over to Connon.
Cool. Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, as Stephen says, what I'm just going to talk about today is a little bit about the history of the bumps in the road that we've had, really about the collaboration between the engineering and operations teams over the last years and since Ticketmaster's inception. So a lot of the barriers that we've run into have been things like time zones, culture, kind of compliance, politics in some instances, and also technical barriers. Jeffrey talked about how important tooling is. It is important, and that can absolutely be a big enabler when you bring the right tools to the table. And one of the things that we've kind of found as we started to move into public cloud and move into AWS is that it highlighted some gaps in our thinking about how we were trying to realign and organize our teams to support moving to a DevOps model, really, and kind of trying to accelerate that work. So I'm going to share with you some of the things we're doing right now. We're not finished with some of the transformations, but we think this is the right way for us to start organizing and get us on a better path for the future. So who am I? Why am I here? It's a very long job title. Sorry about that. So I've been at Ticketmaster for over 18 years. I started off in the call center selling tickets, and then through an enormous amount of luck and a lot of patience and some really amazing mentors, I kind of managed to move into the telco department and then into the online division. So I've been there for a very long time. In my time I've been there, I've been involved in market launches, I've been involved in new product launches, backroom for major operations like London 2012 and other major sporting events, as well as kind of new countries. So the reason I'm here today is we've got a really fantastic team, and because they're very brave, pretty fearless, and extremely patient and passionate. Some of the guys that I work with are here today, so I really appreciate them supporting here, but they're also the reason why I'm here. I've often been saying, hey, we should go out and talk about what we're doing, it's kind of interesting, and one of the guys in the team turned around to me and said, yeah, you should go and do that. So that's really why I'm here today, and I really want to kind of give a compliment to the guys in the team that we have at Ticketmaster about the changes that we're making and how they're really embracing those changes. So thanks, gang. So the thing that I want you to take away from the presentation that I'm going to give you is really history is useful, context is everything, and don't be afraid. And we'll cover some of those, and then we'll just kind of talk a little bit about those at the end as well. So as a little ode to Jeffrey and the teams at Microsoft, I just want to talk about where we've been as a company, as an organization that has kind of heterogeneous infrastructure, and we've got a large Windows and Linux estate. We've always been challenged with sometimes very clear technical distinctions. We have a large Linux estate, large Windows estate, and we sometimes had politics within our company about the tech stacks that were being used. So it's very much Microsoft versus Linux. So when we started seeing this and started seeing the changes happening at Microsoft, it was like, this was pretty incredible stuff. And as Jeffrey kind of talked about, and I talked to some of the other speakers last night, it's not just about loving Linux, it's about open source, adopting open source software, and being open about the practices and principles about operating and using technology. So it's been really incredible. And the big thing I think that a lot of the Windows admins really appreciate is we don't have to put Cygwin on Windows anymore. And in fact, it did come up at dinner last night, putting, and I did it. Has anyone else done it? Anyone else put Cygwin on Windows? Yeah, it's bad, isn't it? Yeah, it's bad. And all the Windows admins really, the really good Windows admins really hated me for it as well. So it means we don't have to do that anymore. And it's really thanks to PowerShell enabling these kinds of changes, and that's been really a lever for seeing a lot of other change at Microsoft. So I just want to say thank you very much for those changes, because that's really helped us get to where we're going as well. So who's TicketMaster? So probably some of you may know TicketMaster, I hope you do. A lot of you will really know us from our retail website. So you go on to TicketMaster.co.uk, you buy tickets. But actually, we're a service provider. We're a broker for ticketing for our venues, clients, and fans. So what you normally experience is really just our website, our retail side. But we have a very complex ecosystem behind the scenes that's really there to support the venues and enable them to try and reach as many fans and kind of sports fans, whether music or arts, as many as possible. So I'm just going to do a quick poll. I want to know what the last live event was that people went to. So if you went to a comedy show, was your last live event, could you just raise your hand? Okay, some. Okay, cool, thank you. Okay, anyone go to a theatre or dance event? Okay, cool, good, thank you. A sports event, anyone go to a sports event? Okay, slightly more, okay, interesting. And a music concert or a festival? Okay, a lot more. Now, I'm not going to drill into the genres, because typically it tends to be heavy metal at tech events, but maybe it will be different here, I don't know. And anyone who hasn't been to an event? Okay, cool. Well, that's good news. That's good news for our industry. So I just want to run through a couple of global stats as well. We are the world's leading ticketing company. We invest about $100 million a year in our core technology. We process a lot of tickets globally. And again, these are global stats as TicketMaster global organization. 80 million unique visitors a month. 28 countries we operate in now. And that's always growing. I'll talk a little bit about that. We've got 100 plus offices globally. So that includes our core technical offices, as well as the kind of field teams that we have that are supporting the venues and the clients, that are helping them get their events and help manage their inventory at the stadiums or arenas or smaller venues like kind of O2 in Islington, for example. 4 million followers on social media and 145 million email subscribers. So of the social media, what's interesting there is on the international side of the business, we've got about 2 million of those are following us there. So that's obviously, that data is newer for us, so it's interesting that we're seeing that that's a very important thing for us now. It's a big change. So the other thing to just cover is TicketMaster is part of Live Nation Entertainment. We merged in 2010, but there are some important separations between the company, and we are impartial in how we offer our technology. Live Nation obviously gives us the ability to expand into new markets, but obviously it's really important for us to have that impartiality, because we also deal with potential competitors and we deal with different genres of events as well. So like the sports and the theatre, that's not something that the Live Nation promotions necessarily does. So that gives us incredible reach and the ability to really grow and invest in our technology. So a little bit of history. This is where we started with the host. So back in 1975, there were 3 college students, so Albert Leffler, Peter Gadshaw, and Gordon Gunn. There were college staffers decided that actually there's got to be a better way to sell tickets than just queuing up or using kind of bingo tickers to get in. So they started work on computerizing it, and they started looking at what they could do. Now, that's a really interesting year, because that's the same year that Bill Gates and Paul Allen developed their basic program for the Altair. Microsoft became a registered trademark, so I think it's quite auspicious given the day we're at today. Betamax was introduced, so maybe not so good. Motorola also obtained a patent for the mobile phone. So a really interesting period, and Ticketmaster was like the beginnings of Ticketmaster was a very innovative time. 1976, Ticketmaster actually started as a formal company, and then IBM also patented the first laser printer, which is, again, really interesting, because that also helped us kind of innovate and change how we were delivering tickets. So you could, when we started doing print-at-home tickets, it meant, you know, you didn't just have to kind of wait for the special ticket stubs. 1977 was the first ticketed event at the Johnson Gymnasium in the University of Mexico. So again, this is really far back, really far back. 1978 was the first international client at the Oslo Arena in Oslo Nye Arena in Norway, and then there's a bit of formatting there. It's not, the geography looks a bit bad. Sorry about that. And then in 1981, Ticketmaster UK opened above the kind of Albury Theatre. And then just after that, in 1988, Australia started doing some of their operations. Now, the interesting thing here, and this is the first time where we start seeing the challenges around dealing with different time zones, is there pretty significant time zone differences between where the teams are. And this is in a time before the internet where connectivity is very expensive, and the way that people connected to the ticketing systems that we're providing, which is what we call the host, that's the name for our primary ticketing platform, was through dial-up, basically. So you would have to dial in, you'd connect to the platform, and then you'd sell tickets. And if there's an issue, the development team's all in the West Coast. So we needed to start building up operations teams that were able to respond to the business. But they were very capable operations teams, and often they'd be writing their own code or scripts to kind of wrap around that stuff. And that's all the way back in, you know, kind of the 80s and early 90s. The other thing that you need to know is that there is something unique about our business. I know everybody says, oh yeah, but it's not, we're unique, we're special. There is something that's a little bit special about some of the challenges we have. So on sales, we have this thing called an on sale, which happens maybe on a Friday morning, 9 o'clock. This example we have here is Chris Rock. We've got a tour. There's our interactive seat map. He's going on sale. Everybody wants the best ticket. So Chris Rock's checking out. Okay, where's the best seat in the house? I know exactly where it is. It's right at the front. Now, it's not just one person that's coming to the site. It's hundreds of thousands of people, sometimes for the biggest events. And they all want the best seat. They don't just want any seat in the house. They want the best seat. So that's the thing that's really unique for us. And that's one of the things that's also maintained some of our operations and engineering kind of fences because of that 8-hour divide. If we've got engineering teams that are in a time zone 8 hours away, and we have a unique and unusual problem that happens during one of these events, then we need to have very capable operations teams that can respond to that, because we're not always going to be able to have engineering teams in those other locations where those businesses are based. And to deal with an on-call, like that might be, maybe you've got a very tight SLA, but it might be 15 minutes, half an hour before you actually get someone who's a bit fuzzy and maybe not completely compos mentis. So that is our unique problem. And the thing about the ticket as well is it's non-fungible. Now, I was quoted previously of saying that, and I didn't say it. One of my friends keeps saying that he really liked that quote that I said, but I never said it. I just want to put that on the record now. It is a great quote, though, so I'm going to use it today. But the fact it's non-fungible means that no ticket is the same, and they can't be exchanged for each other. They are, as you can see from the seat map, the seat right in the middle at the front is the best seat. And that's one of the things that's kind of been changing our industry, and why we have things like the secondary market coming up, and we're doing platinum tickets as well. So this is a unique thing about our industry, and it's one of the things that's been driving, you know, and maintaining some of the patterns we have. So the next thing is oh, sorry, I've just skipped ahead. So the other thing I wanted to show you is we started expanding over the years. And as we expanded into other markets, we started acquiring different bits of technology and having different development shops in different regions and locations. But we still have these time zone challenges. As we grow out, we've got pretty significant time zone challenges there. And if we just have a look at some of the acquisitions and key technical changes that happened, often we were acquiring maybe a business with some technology in a market that had something that we were really interested in. It was going to help us grow as a business, and we were going to try and use that to help us add that to our portfolio and also give us a market share. So these things, obviously adds a bit of complexity, and sometimes the products that we need to go into an emerging market, or it's a, strange thing about a certain character set or a type of finance or currency or the needs of the businesses in those markets mean that we have to look at the portfolio of products that we have and look at what suits that market. But that does mean that we have this continued problem of the time zones. We have this unique issue with that business demand that just comes in. It doesn't happen every day, but when it happens, it's extremely critical and it's really important. We want our fans to have a really good experience when they get their tickets. And I know Stephen teased me about it earlier, but when things don't go well, we're not happy about that. We do care about making that as smooth as we can. But when you can't predict the scale sometimes, and when you've got unusual things happen in unusual ways because of the rapid change, we have to be able to respond to those things. And of the things that we've acquired over the years, we have basically 14 core ticketing products. So some of them are really well suited to sports, some of them are really well suited to kind of music or theatre or festivals. And again, that's introduced some of the complexity that we have around how we operate as a business. So I just want to talk about one of the key things that started happening. Back in 1998, we started building out the internet for the UK. In 1996, the first ticket was sold for TicketMaster in the US. In 1998, TicketMaster UK launched their website. It was based on NT4. Anyone here remember NT4? Yeah, all right, cool. I was worried that okay, good. Okay, so it was NT4 with a bit of SQL Server. It was using Perl to talk to our back-end systems, these hosts, which were running on VAXs. So Ticketmaster used to build its own hardware, used to write its own operating system, and then also write its own software that ran on top of that operating system. So we were listening, Jeffrey. It's not like that anymore. So we started building our website out, and it was great. But what we noticed very quickly is how fast that evolved. So in 1999, we actually predicted we were going to sell about 8% of our inventory online, and we did 20%. And the platform that we had at the time really wasn't scaling. And so we knew that we were going to need to evolve this. We were going to need to do something. So in 2000, in about 2000, we embarked on a rebuild project. And there were a part of some of the changes that's happened in Ticketmaster means that as you move between different business units, we were part of IAC at the time. And there was a company called CitySearch, which was better known in the US. And they had a lot of engineers, both systems and operations people that were from a company called eToys. And actually they came to Ticketmaster CitySearch, and they came to Ticketmaster and re-engineered a platform that was really designed to scale horizontally. And it was, at the time, this was really cutting edge. So Akamai, NetScaler, so this is really early for NetScaler, and also for NetApps, introducing kind of a lot of shared infrastructure, a lot of NFS. There was a high degree of collaboration between the systems engineers and the development teams, because we were building a new platform, we were designing how it was going to be released, and we were designing how it was going to be managed, and thinking about scale everywhere. So everything needed to be horizontally scalable. It started off very simply. We really just kind of fairly standard application proxy layer. We kind of have some application servers and started breaking those out over time into different pools of application servers. We were using MySQL for doing metadata around our events and stuff. Oracle to kind of keep our core data about the users in sync across all of our platforms. And then as we did that, we also recognized that we needed to evolve our back-end systems. So it didn't make sense for us to be running on kind of VAX infrastructure or hardware anymore. So what we started to do was to use an emulator to bring that VAX into our product, start sharing memory across the Linux space, so that we were able to start iterating and evolving on that. So and then also bring that into our data centers. Previously, this had been in all the regional areas. If you remember what I said earlier, connectivity was very expensive. A lot of people were using dial-in and just kind of literally connecting via a serial connection to get access. That you can't do that, and you couldn't do that in 2000. Well, you could do it, but it's not really that great, and it doesn't really give you the capability to scale or innovate. So we started really changing that and then adopting more of a software as a service architecture for how we were trying to present our services. And when we did this, we also started to adopt the same technology on our other products. So on our other sports products, which were more Windows-based, we were also bringing those in-house, taking them out of the venues where maybe they were running and trying to operate those as a software as a service model, and using a lot of the same core technology. And what this also did, as this evolved, as we started adding complexity in here, it meant that we had to have pretty capable operations teams that did care about the queue length on the NIC cards and trying to solve those weird, gnarly problems so that we could free the engineers up to continue developing their application code. So that's where we were back, way back. And it was pretty innovative at the time. And then, in addition to all of those things, there are a couple other key things that happen, and I think most people would recognize how this, if they've been in technology for long enough, they'll have recognized that there was a sea change during these times. The collapse of Enron, led to SOX. PCI really started to mature, and there was proper definition around what the requirements were. And this really led to a kind of an adoption of really solid definitions around roles and responsibilities, which started to become quite entrenched in organizations. And I don't know, did anyone else kind of have a similar experience with this? Hands up, anyone else? Yeah, cool. And I think this is and what was interesting about this, and I always think about this when we start talking about DevOps, is these are the things where we didn't have the right language or the right tools to reinterpret the governance that was necessary at the time. So we created human boundaries around those things. A lot of stuff had to be done with admin privileges. So rather than give everyone admin so they could continue doing things, you basically just restricted who you would give admin to. And because the auditing capabilities really weren't there on some of the earlier operating systems. It really wasn't mature enough for us to be able to do that kind of stuff. And you couldn't necessarily granularly control things. Plus, we still had a 5-8 hour time difference. So we were really entrenching some of those boundaries and barriers. So I put this in sepia because now I know it's a very popular DevOps image, but this was really where we start to hit. Those 5-8 hour time differences, the additional complexity that we were kind of shoving into some of our systems and our organizations. It meant we really didn't have the time to communicate in the same way that we had previously. Prior to that time, if there's a problem, you would get on a call maybe with a developer and you talk through the issues, and actually there wasn't necessarily the same governance around roadmaps and stuff, and people would just get it done. But these things were really entrenching how we were operating and how we were behaving. But the automation, as I mentioned earlier, the automation wasn't there either. So not only was it not about audit capabilities, automation wasn't there. So things like Rundeck didn't exist. Config management, we actually wrote our own at the time for the Linux systems because CF Engine was about, we didn't really like it, and that was the only alternative. So we wrote our own, and we're actually still running it on a number of systems at the moment. Not for long, but we are still running it on a number of systems. But it was really, there were gnarly problems. It was really difficult, and we were adding complexity into the systems and then using efficiencies around teams. So we create operations teams that will be responsible for many things. So we built this, and we were really proud. It was really good. It worked very well for us for a long time. This entrenchment worked really well, and the Rambo's particularly in there for one of my colleagues, Andreas. I don't know if he is here. So we had like a different dev team, a different QA team. There was a CAP team, there was a staging team, and a production team, and that was great because when we acquired a new company, what we did was say, oh yeah, this is how we operate. This is how you need to operate now. So even if they were in a prototype DevOps kind of pattern, this is what we get them to adopt. But there wasn't good tooling. At the time when we started doing this, CI/CD was quite early. There was not consistency in terms of how people would do stuff across these different environments. And again, that 5-8 hour time zone is a real challenge. a lot of the technology that was available at the time was basically conference calls. And it's really easy to be misunderstood in a conference call. And it's really easy to be misunderstood in an email. So all these boundaries were really, really pretty steadily enforced over time. So, less than optimal. A word of warning, this is the first of many cat pictures. If you don't like cats, you should probably leave. So this is kind of where we got to. In 2016, these were even though we'd started down some of our DevOps paths and we'd been kind of trying to enable some of the engineers with some of what we were doing, we had groups of products that were grouped under a VP for an engineering team, and then we, in the technical operations teams, were really kind of across everything. So we had Linux operations, Linux systems, Windows operations, Windows systems, and a DBA team as well that was doing both systems engineering, both engineering and operations work. And underneath that, we had a cloud systems team, a data center team, and our networking groups as well. And in addition to that, working very closely with our teams in the US. So actually, most people had no idea which team they needed to speak to. It was complex, it was confusing. And actually, because we were across everything, it was very difficult to have conversations about what needed to change. If we were going to improve the operability of something, if we were going to improve the reliability, or we needed to innovate on something, getting the buy-in from the engineering teams was sometimes really difficult. But that was also coming the other way. You know, the engineering teams were frustrated because they didn't have access to even speak to us sometimes. And that was a problem. Although this was moving in the right direction, it was still a problem. But for us, there's a big learning, particularly in operations, and I think this is a really, really hard thing. But you basically have to let go a little bit. So a bit like I've misquoted Star Wars, I'm sorry about that, but I thought I'd try and slip in my favorite film. It's a real change to just let go and allow people to learn. If you're going to become a learning organization, people have to make mistakes. And in order for people to feel safe when they're making mistakes, you need to be there with them. Not for them, don't chastise them, you need to be there with them. Because ultimately, fear and anger lead to the dark side. So, okay, moving on. Sorry. So where have we been? So this is kind of where we were. We had engineering teams and operations teams. Operations teams would do the releases, so engineering would pass over a release package, ops guys would do that. Syseng would actually, we were doing a lot of operations work in the systems engineering teams as well, and same for the database teams. It wasn't all around being able to do engineering work. So this was the kind of model we had. So, you know, kind of, it was all right for a time, but we knew that we needed to change. So when we started looking at AWS, this became a real driver. This is a fantastic tool. And again, it doesn't matter. It's not about AWS. It's about the tooling and the ability to provision stuff using solid APIs and, you know, kind of really good tools. When we started looking at that, we started adopting this thing called shifting left. So looking at how we could empower other teams to take on tasks that actually we were kind of holding on to before. So this started to happen. We started getting the ops guys were enabling the engineering teams to do the releases using things like Rundeck or Jenkins or Octopus Deploy. The engineering teams, Syseng, were giving more ability to access and provision stuff through our cloud portal, through our internal cloud to the engineering teams. So at least that was starting to happen. And we brought the Syseng and the database teams together. But then we noticed something interesting was happening, and it didn't really make sense. What we were doing was we were starting to alienate a team that actually knew how the applications would work. So if we were, particularly at a time when the engineering teams weren't familiar yet with running their applications in production. So what we started to worry about was actually we're pushing all of these systems engineering tasks now, or the operations work from systems engineering into ops. We're trying to get the systems engineering and database team and the engineering team to collaborate more closely, but we're kind of losing a massive amount of skill set here. We should probably think how we need to change that. So what we've embarked upon is to try and take more of a T-shaped model in the operations group. Now, this is still imperfect. We've been very open with, within our groups. That we know that this is probably a path to where we need to get to, because ultimately we have too many engineering teams right now. And Jeffrey talked about the platform. I think the platform that is really the future of how we enable teams to be able to operate faster. But when you've got a large complex estate, you have to find the right level of friction that's acceptable for the engineers, because you will talk to some engineers and they'll just say, yep, just give me root, give me admin, give me everything, give me the full admin key to the cloud, and I'm off. That might be okay for one or two devs, but actually it's in a large enterprise company, that's probably not acceptable. And if you have compliance concerns and you've got other worries there, that might be an issue. So what you need to do is try and find the right level to get a platform there. And what we're doing is we're pulling some of our team members out, creating a platform group, and then we're also bringing some of our team members together to work in more of a T-shaped organization of systems engineering, database, and operations people that understand the applications, are geographically close to where those engineering teams are, so that we can remove some of the barriers that have been there before. Because if you're 5 or 8 hours away, you're only really going to be able to communicate over kind of email or kind of Slack. You might see an channel later on, but it's going to be really difficult to get those simple questions asked. And sometimes, if you force people to put a ticket in and it's literally a 5-minute conversation in the corridor, you can save a lot of waste. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. The other thing is really to make it more fulfilling, because if people are working and collaborating and sharing the same goals, that's very powerful. It's extremely powerful, and that's the reason why we're making this change. So the other thing, I put the push me, pull you here, from Dr. Doolittle, is a lot of organizations, when we've done changes in the past, have been very much from the top down. So the pointy-headed boss man comes in and says, right, okay, I'm going to move this to you, you're going to look after this, and then you move your team over here. And this has been the pretty common pattern, but I think we've been looking outside of our industry and looking at, doing some navel gazing as well, to be honest, and looking at the skills that we have in the teams. We employ really smart people. They're passionate and they care. So we're pretty sure and trust that they know what they're doing. So we're trying to change it so that we base the teams are defining the priorities. So working with the engineering teams, the teams themselves should be able to define those priorities and have more say in what needs to get done. And that will also help us with a lot of motivation and kind of how we need to organize ourselves. So we're trying to take a much looser, less hierarchical, get rid of some of the command and control and really empower some of the teams. This is not easy. It's going to take time. There are lots of other barriers that you can sometimes run into with this, and it might be how you organize your finances and all that stuff. So we're in this transition. Hopefully, we're going in the right direction. I think we are. And again, I just want to do a nod to the people in our teams, because they've been really brave and really patient. All the managers just put their ego to the side when we looked at this model, and we said, okay, who do we need to be in the right teams? Let's not worry about how we're going to manage it first. We'll worry about that when we get people in the right groups. And also, we want to be quite fluid. If people think they're in the wrong group, let's have a conversation about it. If we think we've got this wrong, let's have a conversation about it. We don't want to hide anything here. We're going to make mistakes. Absolutely, we will make mistakes and we'll need to change. But I think it's mature if we can kind of do that and adopt that. So this is a little bit of what we look like. And again, it's a bit of an abstraction, but we're trying to create much more of a feedback loop so that these ops and reliability teams, whilst they can't scale to embed people in every single group, because the complexity that we have is still quite high, we think this is going to be the right path for us. And then looking at how we kind of break out our platform tooling, and then whether we're focusing on the engineering teams and the tools that we need to provide them with, or whether we're kind of dealing with the lower level abstractions about how we do that, whether it's how we deal with security groups in our cloud platforms, whatever they might be. And then we've also been building out and looking at technical service delivery and also our service management. So that removes some of the confusion, creates a single point of entry for anyone that doesn't know where they're going to or doesn't know how to get something solved. At least we've got a team that can kind of help with those things that might bridge multiple groups. And again, geography has been the big factor here. Geography is the big factor. The teams where the engineers are, we're trying to put people where those engineering teams are. It makes sense. We want to create that sense of ownership, shared ownership about the deployments, as well as the operations and reliability of the products. So how can we evolve? So I just got back from a holiday in Greece, so I was a bit panicky about this, to be honest with you, because it meant that I had to try and get the deck finished on Monday. But I was thinking about this when I was away, and it occurred to me that actually the way that we've evolved as a company, it was a bit like the evolution of humankind. Humankind started off in, well, I think the latest evidence is West Africa, kind of Morocco, and then kind of moved around and then interbred with the different species of humankind, And then I realized I couldn't really continue with that analogy because it might be a bit X-rated. But it's a bit like DevOps as well. Like actually, we've got multiple teams that went into factions, learned special skills, were a bit unique and special on their own, and now we're trying to bring them all back together. And then I thought, actually, maybe what I should do is look at the civilizations and how humankind has evolved. And I started thinking about Greece or the Romans or Egypt. And to be honest, I settled on Egypt only because they celebrate something that many of us celebrate. And I gave you prior warning, so if you haven't left and you don't like cats, tough. So cats. Egyptians love cats. Cats, we love product. So basically, I'm going to use cats. So basically, what we used to do at Ticketmaster is we'd build a custom house for our cat. So we'd size it up, we'd talk to the cat owners, we'd work out, okay, how big does the house need to be? You know, how much are you going to feed it? Is it just going to be the one cat, or is it going to be two cats? So we'd try and guess, but this would be a very lengthy process. So we'd size up the house, and we'd put the cat in it. And that might work okay, but basically, it might not fit anymore. Now this looks great. For someone in finance, this is amazing, right? It's very efficient. This is super efficient. This cat fits in the box perfectly. But, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that cat's not very happy. So it's not optimized for performance. This box for this cat is not optimized for performance. It's optimized for finance. So the next thing, we started putting lots of cats together in one box. It's not very predictable. Strange things happen. Particularly when you introduce things like, from the outside, toys or food. So will they play nice? No. There's a joke there for the Linux people. I don't know if anyone gets that. Kill -9, basically that's unacceptable. You can't do that. You can't do that. So basically, if you're putting all your applications and stuff on a box together to get efficiencies, you run into some pretty unusual issues and sometimes some really complex dependencies. It's not very pleasant. So what we did is we built our TicketMaster Cloud, and actually it was pretty awesome. At the time, we had concerns. AWS was actually in its infancy when we started doing it, so they pretty much only had EC2 available, and no one else was really doing it. And we thought, well, we've got all these servers, we have all these very high demand on sales, let's reuse our infrastructure to do that. So we built our cloud, and that was okay, but it was, the boxes were all right where we put on our cats. Sometimes they're a good fit, sometimes they're not a good fit. It was optimized for some cost and some operational efficiency, but probably not the best fit. So what we're doing now is we're basically using someone else's box. The biggest thing for this is it's a transparency of costs. So previously when we built our internal cloud, we had over we still do, 20,000 VMs running on our internal cloud globally. It's in 3 regions, and that's a pretty significant footprint. But nobody really knows how much that's costing. So people will fire up a VM, they leave it running. You fire up a VM in a public cloud, someone notices. Well, you hope someone notices. Those costs are a lot more transparent, and that's very powerful because it also gives you better understanding about what's the value and cost of your product. Is your product bringing the value of those costs? If so, great. Maybe it isn't, but maybe that's something you need to tolerate. It might be a shared service that's necessary and it's part of glue. But it's a really powerful tool to have that transparency of cost. And also, it's super easy to use, right? Compared to any on-premise tooling that people might have done for their own home-baked cloud solution, it's going to be much more powerful. Again, there's a whole organization, their whole focus is to build tools. So they're going to do a better job than you will. So what's happening next? Okay, so containers, yes. I know there's a couple of presentations about containers. Ticketmaster's looking at containers. Thing is, some of these cats don't go in these boxes. They don't fit very well. They're not designed to go in these small boxes. And it really means that we need to rethink a lot of what we're doing. Ticketmaster is actually very keen on. We've been looking at Kubernetes. We've got one of our new websites is running on Kubernetes in AWS, and it looks very promising. I think it's a bit early for us with Windows and containers and Kubernetes, but it's something we're definitely going to keep an eye on. And basically, this is where we need to get to. We need to rethink, re-engineer our applications to suit the model going forward, which will give us the ability to group some of our applications together. If you're a Kubernetes fan, you can build your pod and you can put all these things together, and that's going to play nicely. And they can have the right level of communication that you've got control on. So, you won't need to kill -9 anymore. So what are we doing to kind of make this happen? So on the Windows side, we're really kind of decided on a bunch of key technology. So PowerShell's right up there, Chef's right up there, Chocolate's right up there. We're using AWS, we're using Packer to kind of build our images. Terraform's our kind of infrastructure as code choice. It gives us a little bit of a kind of independence about where we're moving stuff, if it's on-prem or if it's AWS or anywhere else for that. GitLab has been very powerful. We used to use SVN, and we had lots of people using different tools, but now actually we've moved everyone to Git. It was probably about 2010, 2012 maybe. And now we're using GitLab CI as well, so we're standardizing on using GitLab CI for doing our infrastructure builds and provisioning. So this is a real chance for us to clean up. And just to explain a little bit about some of the process we're using to clean up, and I'll put a link down here. The slides will be available, but I'll put a link down here. TicketMaster built and has open sourced a tool called the Tech Maturity tool. And what we did is we've gone through and spoken to all of our different teams about how mature is your product. Looked at things like continuous delivery, load testing, all of that stuff. And we're using this to give us a guide about whether you are ready. Is your product ready to move to a public cloud? Is your product good enough? Do we need to move it? Do we need to take some drastic intervention? And it's a public tool. Internally, it's a public tool, so all the teams can see how they rank each other. They rank themselves as, kind of, we went through with the architects and they kind of did it. But it's been a very powerful tool for us, and it's been a way for us to gauge who's ready to move to public cloud or not. So it's been open sourced. If anyone's interested, definitely have a look at the GitHub account. Kind of if you want to get involved, do. We definitely appreciate that. And I just wanted to share as well that our kind of mantra on our principles for modernization. So this was something that actually the US team were doing when they first started their AWS stuff, and we've kind of been collaborating with them and trying to work out how we stay in sync. But they didn't have such a large Windows estate, and they didn't start with Windows on their AWS journey. We've kind of started with Windows first on some of that. But basically, these are the principles we're trying to use to help us modernize. Not everything's going to go there. There may be some edge cases, but really, this is a very powerful way for us to understand where we need to go to and how we need to get there. So getting rid of our dependency, our addiction on NFS and CIFS, so that actually we can, it'll change everything for us, but really moving away from creating immutable systems rather than kind of having to depend on configurations happening, and is really going to revolutionize what we're doing. So, in summary, history is useful. So the reason why history is useful is some of the things you used to do in the past and you decided were the wrong thing might not be the wrong thing anymore. You can go back to them because the tools have changed. Context is everything. The context has changed. Like, people have got different drivers and different motivations. So understand the history, because that also tells you those motivations. Yeah, context is everything, right? It gives you insight into why things happen in a particular way. And if you need to change your behavior as a company, or if you need to change your behavior in a team, if you understand why people are holding on to what they think is important, understand the context. Just take some time and listen. It's really important, and you'll definitely get more achieved if you can do that. And then also, don't be afraid. And that also means don't frighten people. If you really want to bring people with you, it's really. We were chatting last night over dinner with the guys from Facebook, and for some infrastructure people, using Git for the first time is terrifying. Like, it's terrifying. If they've never done it before and they've just kind of written scripts and it's in their home directory, moving to a collaborative tool can be terrifying. So remove that fear. Don't make people afraid, and also don't be afraid. Change is a good thing, but embrace it and go with it, and then you can influence it. So with that, I think I'm out of time, actually. But I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much. to tap me up. I'll be here during the day, skulking around. It was. Flick the bottom again.
What are the sorts of things that made you choose GitLab and GitLab CI over some of the other products?
Well, to be honest with you, it was just that it seemed to get momentum. So we were using Jenkins for doing our kind of Terraform builds. And some teams started using GitLab CI, and it just seemed to work better for them. We were using GitLab for our code management, for our code repos. I think when we, I think we looked at Mercurial and Git when we first looked at the repos back then, and the developers really just preferred using Git. It's difficult in a larger organization because not everyone's going to be happy with the choice, but at this point, I think everyone's pretty happy with Git. It gives a really good workflow. It's a very collaborative tool, so it's worked out pretty well. But a lot of the tools that have come around have tended to start off maybe as a side project and then basically snowballed from there. And there's always a risk when you do that, because suddenly you might find something doesn't scale. And that's definitely been a challenge when something suddenly becomes very popular. No one was anticipating that it became popular because they only built it for a small team. But yeah, I mean, it was really just by natural selection, really, evolution.
Sam Guggenheimer.
Sam. Hey.
Can you double click on the maturity assessment you do that you talked about?
Can I double click on it?
Show it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That one.
Yeah. What's behind that?
Oh, which?
So the details.
Oh, the details. Oh, yeah, right. Okay. So what have we got here? Code commenting strategy. Yeah. So we've got code commenting strategy. Oh, maybe I'll read it from here. It's easier. Code commenting strategy, code management strategy. Oh God, I can't read that.
So is there
test suite, so
DevOps
logging.
practices, runbook adoption, on-call
yeah.
strategy? Is there like best practice guides that sit behind, or a checklist that sits behind each one of those things?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do they do the assessment?
So when we do the assessments, actually it's all on the GitHub account as well. Actually, so there's a Google spreadsheet which shows you the template that we use to go through with the teams. We kind of go through, ask the questions of them, and then go back and then do another review. But they are kind of bucketed around like best practice around testing and quality, around performance, about kind of measurements and instrumentation around code, operability, single points of failure, kind of how you do your data management and that kind of stuff. So they are kind of branched out around that. And obviously some of those are key things, like if you don't do continuous kind of integration, then you probably shouldn't go into a public cloud, because it's not going to be a good. If you don't automate your releases, you definitely shouldn't go to a public cloud. So kind of it's all that stuff. But yeah, absolutely, the whole workflow is up on the GitHub account that explains how to do that. So it's a really cool tool. Really cool tool.
Question down the back there.
Yeah, well, my question for you is about the culture side. So how did you communicate this kind of changes to resources in the different teams? And it's like when you face some kind of resistance, like you employed new tool and some resources would like feel offended that this tool will replace me, or like create a threat on my career within the organization. How you address such challenges within the process?
It's difficult. Yeah, so the question was really about how we deal with the culture of resistance and how we communicate things around new tools and changes that we're trying to make. So actually, it depends on the department in some instances, because it's quite a large company, and we're kind of working on different things. We might be working on the sports platform, or it might be the team in the US. It depends on the team, but for the most part, it's done through the way that I can probably talk about the changes that we were making and some of the stuff we were doing. We were actually had a fairly open forum to try and discuss with everyone why we wanted to make changes. The way we started to begin with was we started with a small assessment, talking to individuals in the teams, trying to understand where the frustrations and problems were, and look at, okay, where do we need to get to and where are the problems now? Then we started to talk to the managers and open it up and say, okay, well, look, here are the issues that we've got. We think this is the way that we can solve this. What do you think? What do we need to change? So we basically, although that was a kind of a top-down thing, it was a very collaborative approach, and then we opened it up to the teams to try and talk to them and explain to them what we wanted to do. The interesting thing is that and this is where I really appreciate the bravery from the people in our teams, is we actually went in without a fully formed plan, because one of the problems is if you go in with a fully formed plan, actually you're taking away some of the autonomy you're trying to give people. And it's a difficult balance, because a lot of people will get very frustrated and frightened because they'll not see, I don't see the end goal, or I don't see how we're going to get there. They might see the vision of where we want to get to, but not how we're going to get there. So that's a really difficult thing, because that's frightening. That can be quite frightening. So the only way to do that is to make sure that you're transparent. So if there is a problem, don't hide it, be open about it, and have conversations about it. In terms of tooling, that's really difficult. Again, you have to really treat people as more of a product, treat it like a product, and think about the users and what do they need. Going back to Jeffrey's point, you have to listen, really, and try and pay attention. It's not always that easy, particularly in a distributed organization, though. So I'm curious to know what other people do, so if anyone wants to come and talk to me about that, I'd love to hear it.
Luckily, we also have an entire track of case studies where people are going to be addressing things. I'm pretty sure Sam's going to address this in his talk after the coffee break as well. So. We've got time for one more question, and then we'll get everyone off to a quick break.
Yell it out and I'll repeat it.
Yeah. The tech maturity, do you also use it for your chef cookbooks, the infrastructure as code?
Well, so we do it at a product level. So we make the assumption that actually those things are tied to a product. So if a particular team is using Chef and those cookbooks, that should be included in that. I mean, some of those tools are, well, I mean, we did an assessment of some of our internal tools that the technical operations teams present, so that kind of stuff is included in that. But absolutely, yeah, those kind of tests are included. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay. So thank you very much,
All
Connon.
right,
That
thank
was
you.
really good. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
So we got a break for about 20 minutes, then we're going to be back. Don't move yet. We're going to be back in here, ready to go at 11:35, seated, ready to go. 11:35, we're going to have Sam Guggenheim who's going to be talking about moving, well, it was moving 65,000 Microsofties to the cloud. Now it's moving 70,000. So now it's 75, because every time we keep changing this, we have to print it again. So we're talking about that. Just a reminder, there are toilets up here, just over there. There are toilets downstairs immediately to the right. And I mean, to be honest, this room's going to be locked. If you want to leave your bags on your chairs and stuff like that, then just absolutely feel free to do so. Come back and grab the same seat. Back here, seated, ready to go, 11:35. So